Good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining me. I'm Sean with Fritz Home Tech Solutions, and unfortunately, Ryan with Tech Smart Homes couldn't be here today due to obligations. Um, so today we were originally going to talk about smart lighting. I know I've been posting about it all week, and I apologize for that. But I wanted to, since I'm doing this solo, I was going to delve more into the cybersecurity aspect of smart homes. Like I started on last week. We kind of covered basics like the router, changing your password, and stuff like that. I will mention those again, and I'll kind of go more in detail about those again. But so bear with me. So let's start it. And of course, if you guys have any questions about security as far as your smart home, or even just your personal like laptops or your personal devices at home, let me know. Um, so let's get into it. So last week I had mentioned the first line of defense in your cybersecurity in your home is your router. Um, that's where the internet connects to your home. Well, technically the modem is, but you can't really do much about that. So I'd mentioned Griffin and Firewalla, and I still stand by those two recommendations. There's Firewalla's website. They have several devices. The reason, and I'll reiterate why your router slash your Wi-Fi is so important, is because again, that's connection to your home. Um, and it's also the biggest vulnerability that most people don't think about because, like I said in the last live stream, you get it from your ISP, whether whoever that may be, Comcast, AT&T. There's a lot of them out there, and you just kind of plug it in and forget about it. So the issue with that is you have default passwords, default settings, and stuff like that. Um, it's pretty easy to find the default passwords for a certain router on the web. So, for example, if I had some ASUS router, I can just type in default admin password for ASUS. And you'll usually find it right here. Yeah, it's usually something like admin, admin, root, admin, something along those lines. It's even the default password for like Unify equipment, which is enterprise level. It's usually UBNT, UBNT. So that's why it's so important that after you hook up that router, you log in. And how you would log in is you usually get its IP address. A very standard IP address for your first gateway, or for most home gateways, is 192.168.1.1. That's not mine. I recommend changing that. Um, so like you can actually do different networks other than the 192.168.1. You can do .2, .3, .4, .5, whatever you want to change in there. Um, you can even go a little bit crazier and do .10.0.0.1. And this is some IT networking stuff. It's kind of high level, but you can easily look this stuff up online. But I suggest changing that first so it won't be so easy. But that's your local password, your local IP. That's not how a hacker's really going to see your stuff. How they're going to end up seeing is whatever. Um, sorry, I was just reading a warning. So the hacker's going to look at your public IP, and that's just a matter of scanning. Most things that you're not going to know. I mean, you could easily look it up and go, what's my IP? I'm not going to do it here because then you'll see my personal IP address, and then all you guys out on the internet can mess with me. But um, a hacker is just going to run a scan across all IP addresses and find something that's interesting. So the idea of Your home security is to try to make it as hard as possible for hackers. What is that? Yes, I'm still there. Sorry. It's a little bit weird trying to do it solo. But back to what I was saying. They're going to look for your public IP address and find something that's open. So that's if you have open ports on your router. You don't want any of those unless you are aware that they're open. You've taken precautions to mitigate any threats that might come in on that port. And a port, of course, is a door. Just think of it as a door you're opening to your home. It's a digital door. But if they get your IP address, they can very well log into your router from there, and that's where your admin default admin password is important. You got to change that first off. Um, After that, you know, you want to make sure it's configured correctly. There's nothing open, and once your router's hardened, is what we call in the industry. Then you can look at your Wi-Fi itself. You don't want to include your Wi-Fi password in the Wi-Fi name. I've seen people do it. It's really dumb, but people have done it. They'll name it their address or something stupid, and then that will be the password. So if you make it, I know people want to do it for convenience, but if you make it easy for yourself, you're making it easy for anybody. A hacker, if they're targeting you, can drive by your house and sit out on the street and hack into your network. Once they're on your network, that's a worst case scenario. You don't want a device on your network that you're not aware of. So they can do a lot of things. I explained a man in the middle attack. I can kind of draw that out for you if you want to understand it. But that's where they siphon all through their data through their machine. So your data is going through their machine and then out to the internet and then back. So they're seeing everything. So your first defense is a strong password or passphrase, like I described last time. Passphrases are a little bit easier to remember. Like I said, I'm recapping. Easy to remember. They're long in length, and they usually include all your lowercase, uppercase, numbers, and a symbol. So, for example, saying my background's 100% white or 80% white, and then you just met everything, and you can use that as a password. Don't use it because you got it from the stream. People will know. So yeah, your first line of defense is your Wi-Fi router. I don't recommend using ISP Wi-Fi routers. Again, they're usually default configured. The guy plugs it in, and even if they're not default configured, some ISPs will pre-configure them. So they'll give you a separate Wi-Fi password. They'll give you a separate admin password, and that's unique to you. But that in there lies another issue. Someone else knows your credentials. You don't ever want that to happen. You don't want people to know your passwords and all that stuff. So even if you think it's smart, like when I got on with, I think it was Spectrum, they sent me a Wi-Fi router and it had a default, Spectrum, blah 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 Wi-Fi, and then it said Holly Hill 65 or something like that. It was some random password, and I was like, well, I'm changing that because who's not to say that there's a malicious actor or a bad guy out working for the ISP, and he now knows my credentials. So immediately change that stuff, even if you think it's smart. Another thing company ISPs or internet service providers were doing was using the device's serial number as the Wi-Fi password. My parents were doing this for a while, and I was kind of like, that's a terrible idea because when you run a Wi-Fi password cracking tool, what it does is it goes through this long process of getting what's called the three-way handshake. That's basically how your device asks Wi-Fi for access. So basically a three-way handshake goes, hey, I want to access your network. The Wi-Fi router goes, hey, what's my password? And your device goes, here's your password. And they basically create a handshake, and that creates a connection. Um, there's a lot of metadata in those packets that are being bounced back and forth. And one way to crack a Wi-Fi password is to get the serial number and use that against it to see if it's the password. And if you leave it like that, well, it's the password, and you've already got in. CenturyLink was terrible about this. Their default passwords were the serial number of the router, and that like I said, that metadata is captured in that packet, the data packets. So it's not fun, or it's not smart because it leads to somebody getting on your network, and then that's not fun. Um, so yeah, look for a Wi-Fi router. If you're looking for your own Wi-Fi router, look for something with IDS and IPS. That stands for intrusion detection system and an intrusion prevention system. These are great because they're monitoring the traffic flow. They will kind of give you alerts as to if something intrudes on your Wi-Fi, if something tries to brute force its way in or breaks in through unconventional means without knowing the password, because that is possible. Um, and then the IPS will basically stop it. I have Griffin up on the screen because they have this built in. Um, they also have a lot of other monitoring. So get something that has like anti malware already built in. We see this a lot on computers itself. So like antivirus, it's anti malware, and they basically put that on the router. So when you have a router that has that on there, you don't have to worry about phones. You don't have to worry about your IoT devices, Internet of Things, your smart devices. You don't have to worry about tablets and other things like, for example, iPhone. There's not a whole lot of, if any, anti-malware programs you can download and install on an iPhone. But iPhones are still capable of being vulnerable to attacks. If you have that anti-malware program running on your entire network and it tries to go to a malicious site by accident or by a phishing email or a phishing SMS, which is called smishing. That's a weird term. But the anti-malware built into the router will prevent that. It will stop that, which is great. It's one less thing you have to worry about. It's one less thing that you have to buy, because when you buy it for a device, you have to buy it for all devices. And malware usually comes in packages of like 5 to 10 computers. So, you know, look at those things. An anti or intrusion detection system and intrusion prevention system usually comes pretty standard on a lot of routers. You just have to enable it. That's in those settings. I will say most of those systems, because they do data packet analysis, or they scan each data packet of data coming through your network, it does slow down the network. So if you have like 1 gig fiber, it's going to reduce it to about 400 megabytes. Um, if you have the anti malware, you don't really need that on devices that stream, if that makes sense. So, like your smart TVs, your Fire Sticks, your Roku's, your laptops, you won't need to put IDS, IPS on there because you have the anti malware, and that's on the device itself or on the router, and it'll kind of alert you if that stuff's happening. But on your smart devices, you won't. You won't see that stuff. You need to actually put your smart devices on their own network. So that's like a different SSID or a different Wi-Fi network. This is actually a practice I do. So I have my basic home network where all my family's laptops, tablets, and phones connect to, but all my smart devices connect to a separate Wi-Fi that's completely separated. So they can't talk with the devices on this network, if that makes sense. So I have Wi-Fi network 1 with all these devices, like my family's laptops and stuff on it, and Wi-Fi network 2 that has all my smart things on it, or smart devices, and my smart device can actually not talk to my laptops or anything like that, which can cause issues if you're trying to run, like, let's say you're running Home Assistant on a virtual machine on a laptop or a desktop. Well, then that causes an issue because that Home Assistant won't be able to talk to the smart devices on that network. You actually have to then put that machine on the Wi-Fi network, but it keeps them from talking because unlike devices, unlike your devices, like your laptops and tablets that you can actually like physically get into, you can kind of tell if it's infected. Usually, you'll Windows Defender will pop up on a Windows machine and tell you there's something shady going on, or your antivirus if you have it on there. Like Norton, don't buy Norton; they're trash. Um, will tell you if there's something going on, but your smart devices you can't. Where's it going to tell you in the app? They're not going to tell you that. So it's best to secure your network from IoT devices, your cameras and everything. Put them on a separate network. Keep them away, and have IDS and IPS enabled on that network for sure. Those smart devices don't need a gigabit worth of speed. They can get by with whatever the IDS or IPS enables. So, you know, you also want to have a way, and there's not a whole lot of things out there that I've seen. I have two of them up here on the screen. The Griffin and the Firewall are the two that I know of, and you can also make custom software that does this. You want to have a way of knowing when a device connects to your network. Unify can do it. It can send you an alert. Griffin does it. I used to have it, and it would always tell me if someone connected to my network, and I would have to actually I had it on block. Anything that tried to connect to a network, it would automatically block. I would have to approve it. Firewall does the same. Because you don't want just random things getting on your network. These two devices will also tell you if there's suspicious activity. So let's see. The purple is actually probably what you guys would want to go for because can act like a router. I don't recommend using it as a router itself. I recommend attaching it to your network and running everything through it because what it will do is it protects your privacy. As you can see, it's cybersecurity. It will monitor devices for suspicious activities, which is like port scanning, reaching out to foreign IP addresses, trying to make connections to other devices, opening ports outside from it. So I had an issue with a Wyze camera once. It all of a sudden started opening port SSH out to the outside, and I actually contacted their support and was like, "Hey, why is your camera trying to connect to something using SSH?" Which, if you don't know what SSH is, it's basically a way for someone to connect on the back end of a device or to a device via like a terminal or a command line. So, do I have terminal? Terminal. So it looks like this, and I can go SSH root and then whatever its IP address. So we'll just make one up. So if I hit that and I have the right credentials into that device, I can then make that device do whatever I can do to it. And when a device gets infected on a network, it usually creates what's called an attack vector or attack surface. So I'm basically using that as a device to scan the rest of your network, attack other devices, things that I want to get into, like your laptop, where you keep all your banking information, your phone, especially phones, you keep everything there. And if I can use a vulnerable device, whether it be a smart camera or a smart light, then I'm on your network through that device, and I can start doing whatever I can do to get to another device that has more critical information. So again, you want to have a router that can detect all this stuff. It can see all this crazy stuff going on. Unless you're a software engineer, then you can just build a program and put it on any computer that can scan things. There's programs like Snort that do this. There's a lot of Python scripted programs that do this, but most of you probably aren't going to be software programmers. So it's best that to get a device like this just to do it for you. Plus, it's probably going to work better than your software, your program that you develop anyway. Let's face it, not all software programs are created equal. Again, so the two products I usually recommend to my clients first off, if they're security oriented, are these two. I've used Griffin in my house. I've used Griffin at my clients a lot. It's pretty successful. I will say with more security comes less convenience, so it can cause issues like certain devices can't connect to their cloud servers. Maybe because their cloud servers are blacklisted, or maybe they're in a country that you blocked, like China, Russia, something like that. But for the most part, they do their job without any issues. UniFi is great. It's amazing. I love UniFi. However, you do need to know what you're doing to use it. Not too terribly much. It's become a lot easier to use in the last 5 years. But this is going to give you the strongest Wi-Fi, the most options to make your network secure, and the best security. And it's not considerably any more cheaper or expensive. Hi, Christy. Hi, Tim. How you guys doing? Thanks for watching. If you're just joining in, we're talking about smart home cybersecurity. So please feel free to leave your questions in the chat, and I'll address them. So I think another thing a lot of people don't consider when building their smart home. So your Wi-Fi is your first line of defense. What you're putting on your network is your second. So I don't think a lot of people consider when they buy Amazon Alexas or Wi-Fi light bulbs or anything like that they're a security threat. They are. They connect to the internet directly. That can be an issue. For one, you don't know where your data is going to. You don't know what server it's connecting to. You don't know if that server is compromised or who's on the other end or just who's watching your house. So like a man in the middle attack doesn't necessarily need to happen on your personal network. They can intercept the traffic from your house to wherever else it's going, which is kind of a scary thought. But you need to know what's transmitting data outside your house. So every Wi-Fi enabled, well, not necessarily just Wi-Fi, but every device you put on your network that has to reach out to a cloud is a potential security risk, and it's something you need to consider. I have some notes here. Sorry, I'm just reading over them. So the cloud security risk is it's another password and application, an account that you have to create. I have so many of them; it's hard to keep track. But every time you get a Wi-Fi enabled device, it always needs its own app. Then you have to create an account, and then you got to create a password for that. And 9 times out of 10, the average user is going to create or use the same password, and it's going to be something along the lines of the name of a loved one, whether it be a person or an animal, an important date followed by an exclamation point or two. That about sums up 90% of the population's passwords. And it usually will be some combination of replacing vowels with letters or something like that. But that's not making it any harder. If I wanted to hack into your stuff, I would scour your Facebook for a few days, figure out all of the important names, important dates, throw it in a list, have a program generate as many passwords out of those different items as I can. So this coming from Tim, what's the best practice for Plex if I want to expose data outside my house? Do I need to worry about any extra security? So if you're trying to have other people connect to your Plex server and view it, is that what you're talking about? There's going to be a delay, but if that's what he's talking about, the best thing to do is actually create a VPN server where the Plex server is and give whoever the VPN access to your server. But Plex itself does have its own built-in app that's encrypted. So just using Plex app So pay for Plex Pass. Tim, to answer your question, paying for Plex Pass is the best way of doing it because you're using the app and with the encryption, you can actually get your data outside the house. But if you don't want to pay for an app, you can create a VPN server, and they usually don't take up a lot of data. So saying server doesn't mean you need server hardware. Saying server means you just need the server software. So you can install something like SoftEther on a laptop or a decent desktop, set up the server, and then download the app on whatever laptop, tablet, or phone that you want to, and then just connect through VPN. And that's actually the most secure way because it's a direct connection from your phone or tablet or whatever device you have on to your actual home network. It virtually puts that item onto your home network. So it's an encrypted channel, it's password protected. You can even get them with MFA, and that's probably the best way I recommend doing it if you want to go the most secure route. However, VPNs do considerably slow down your bandwidth from that device. So, like, let's say on your phone you have 500 megabytes download and upload wherever you're at, whether it be on 5G or your home. The VPN is going to half that. So just keep that in mind. So if you're trying to pull 4K videos or something like that, it's probably going to mess that up. But I hope that answers your question. Um, VPN or PlexPass, because PlexPass just makes it easier. So, I mean, MFA, I mentioned that. That's another thing. So the accounts that you make with the crappy passwords, you need to put MFA on them. All of them. Multi-factor authentication, not just with, don't use the SMS. I explained it in the last live stream. The SMS can be easily overcome by SIM swapping, and that's usually due to the lack of security or care by your phone company. Well, you're welcome, Tim. But put multi-factor authentication on everything that you can, bank accounts, email. I can't stress how important MFA is through specifically an authenticator app or a YubiKey. YubiKeys aren't expensive. I think I got mine for like $25, but it's a physical key. Here, I'll show it. Actually, a physical little USB key. There you go. That I can plug into any computer. And so if something needs my authentication for multi-factor authentication, I'll plug it into my computer and I literally have to tap it. And that, I think, putting a pin most of the time. And that authenticates that website, that service that I'm trying to use to that. That's its multi-factor authentication requirement, along with the username and password. On a phone, it uses the NFC. I just tap it to the back. If you don't want to get that because it can be kind of a pain in the butt, if you forget at home, use something like the Microsoft Authenticator app or the Google Authenticator app. Put it on all your accounts. Now, another thing is where do you get one of those keys? You get them from Amazon. It's just YubiKey. There's different types, so make sure you pay attention to what you're buying. If you get a YubiKey that's USB-C, it only plugs into USB-C devices. If you get, like, this one's a USB-A, so it plugs into almost everything that exists right now because everything has a USB-A port on it, or USB-A. I recommend those if you want to be super secure. I have my computer locked down with one of those, so like my Microsoft account, my work Microsoft account, my Dashlane. So Dashlane kind of leads into what I was going to say. Not just multi-factor authentication, but don't use the same passwords for everything. Again, like I said, use a passphrase, but also that's going to get hard to remember. So use a password manager. And I specifically use Dashlane. Now, Dashlane is not sponsoring this video, but they're amazing. I've been using them for about 4 years now. You basically sign up for an account. I actually pay for it. because you get a little bit more benefits when you pay for it, but I think it's like $5 a month. Um, and it basically becomes an extension on your browsers, and it becomes it's actually an app on your phone and your tablets, and it works the same. Give me 1 second, I'll be right back. Sorry about that. Um, so use a password manager. It makes life easier. You only need to remember one password, and that's to the password manager. And then it fills out. It can even fill out the passwords for you. Dashlane has a cool ability to where some websites that it partners with, it can actually go in and change your passwords directly from the application itself. So let's say one of my passwords got compromised in some dumb data dump. It will notify me for one, so I can monitor that stuff. And then it will say, hey, do you want me to change this password for XYZ websites if they have a partnership with them? And you hit yes, and it will just go change it in its system, and you're good to go. If it can't do that, it can generate passwords for you and save them, and it comes in pretty handy because most of my passwords I don't even know anymore. I don't need to know anymore. It just kind of does it for me. Back in the day, you had maybe 5 passwords, but now I think I have upwards of like hundreds. So a password manager will help you and prevent you from using the same passwords over and over and over and have stronger passwords. So in all the accounts that you make for a smart home, this is how you reduce them becoming security threats. Reduce. There's still the off chance that one of these companies gets hacked and there's a big data breach and all your username and password and all that info is dumped anyway. But if you're using the one password, then you're good. Um, Another thing to consider is whose server you connect your device connecting to when you're using the cloud based devices. So if I'm buying Wi-Fi products that connect to some server in China or Russia, government websites. Sorry. So Pam says I was wondering what that key option was on various government websites. Government websites are actually different. A lot of them use what's called a CAT card. So it looks a lot like a credit card with a little chip on it. They don't use YubiKeys that I know of. I've seen it in the field before where employees that have to access government websites to get government information, whether they have a contract with them or not, they have to access it with a CAT card. So that's usually what that's indicating. And those are pretty much the same thing. They're just issued and you can't really change it. My YubiKey I can use with any website I want to, and I can actually change the key at will. If I don't want it to use for that website anymore, I can just turn it off. Where a CAT card is specifically only for that website, and it's issued to you by the government. Um, so back to whose server are you connecting to? Um, if I have a device that's connected to a server in China or Russia, the security risk there is I don't know who's controlling that server. I don't know who's going to access that server. I don't know who. This is also a privacy issue. I don't know who's looking at my data. Um, if the Chinese government says, well, we want access to your house for whatever reason, say I'm a journalist and I'm writing something bad about the Chinese government and they want access to my cameras in my house and they just happen to be Chinese based cameras connected to there, they can look that up and they can get into my cameras. Or they can give my username and password to a malicious group such as a hacker group or something like that. That's also something to consider. I'm not saying all cloud based devices are bad or be scared of them. Just be aware of where your stuff's going. If it's connecting to the internet, it's going somewhere. Um, so aside from web based devices, you can get local devices, and this is a lot more secure, in my opinion. Um, the data stays on your network. It doesn't go off your network because it's usually connecting to a local server, such as a Home Assistant server or an Open Home server or OpenHAB. I think it's OpenHAB. Habitat is the same way. That data's not going off your network; it's staying all there localized. Um, Habitat might be different. I think they connect to a server, just like SmartThings does. I don't know. I haven't used it yet, but if it's all localized and it's not going off your network, you don't have any risk of someone intercepting the traffic, it going to a server and being compromised there. You don't have to start a username or an account with another party, so there's no use for username or another password. I mean, Home Assistant requires a password to log into it locally, but it's not something that's out on the web that's going to get dumped. If that makes sense. I mean, there are devices that are local. For example, LifeX, as far as smart bulbs go, are one of the very, very, very few Wi-Fi bulbs that are 100% local or can be. So if I basically unplug my lights, my LifeX bulbs still react to my Home Assistant. Or if I unplug my Wi-Fi from the internet modem, so I have no internet coming to my house, my LifeX bulbs will still turn on and off. It will still be part of automations. The iSmart Gate that I got to replace some IQ for my garage does the same. Um, so local is always better. There's just a little bit more on you when you have local devices, such as checking for firmware updates, making sure the firmware is updated. The reason why firmwares get updates usually for security vulnerabilities that they find and try to patch. A lot of it's for functionality as well, but always update your firmware because then that changes basically the software of the device, and whatever vulnerability existed before that is no longer there. That's one of the biggest downsides is you have to keep up with that, not some cloud server somewhere that says, "Oh, hey, you got a new firmware. I'm going to update you." Um, Govee has a lot of things, and I've been messing around with their local API, so you can connect to those locally, but you still have to have a Govee account. So local devices are usually things that are like Zigbee, Z-Wave, and Bluetooth. Well, all these devices can't just connect to your network and work. They have to be connected to a gateway. SmartThings Hub, Akara Hub, Philips Hue Hub, all these hubs, Tuya Hub, they all are where these devices connect, and then they go out to the internet. So instead of like having 50,000 devices on your network, you have one. But the thing still goes to the internet, and it still connects to the Wi-Fi gateway, unless you're using something like Home Assistant, where you can plug in a like Sonoff or Sky Connect Zigbee dongle. They'll connect, and it's all local. It doesn't go anywhere except for to that Home Assistant server. I mean, and that's kind of the ideal setup for, in my opinion, is if you want to stay all local and you want to stay as secure as possible, you can get a car device or devices, and you can get SmartThing devices, you can get Sonoff devices, but you can connect them all to your Home Assistant via dongle, and it all be local, and you don't have to worry about anything going out to the cloud or having more security risks on your network than are necessary. Oh, cameras. So, most consumer grade cameras, the popular ones out there that you hear about are Ring, Google, um, Blink. If you're really big on Amazon, you want to have cheap ones. Wise is the same thing. They're all Wi-Fi cameras. They all have to connect to a server, and that's it. I mean, you have to pay usually a subscription to view back or feedback or like look at videos that are already passed. Um, but there are local options. I think Arlo has a so anything with a base station that you have to buy is usually a local solution where your camera data goes to that thing and that acts as its server. Yes, it can connect to an app on the phone, so like Eufy. Eufy usually have the base station and it connects to your app, but through the internet. But that's two devices connecting to each other, not a device going to a server, then you connecting to that server as well, like Ring. Excuse me. Um, I currently have Ring. They've had issues in the past. They haven't had any issues lately. They have decent products, but I also have my account MFA'd. I think that was a big security risk that everybody saw on the news when Ring cameras were getting hacked. It's because those accounts had easy passwords and no multi-factor authentication. But I will be switching to Eufy. Um, Eufy has that local base station. It's all locally controlled. There's nothing to a cloud except for like the snapshots. But we talked about that last live stream in depth. PoE systems. There's a lot of them out there. A PoE system is the power over Ethernet, the cameras that you plug into Ethernet and then run to what's called a DVR or NVR. It's basically a local box with hard drives. Old school ones had tape. These have been around for a long time, but now they've gotten smart where they connect to the internet. So Reolink is a really good company that does that. I've installed that into at a client's house and they loved it. What it essentially does is all those cameras shoot their feed straight into the box. The box can be viewed locally on a monitor. It's like a TV or something like that. And you can get an app and log directly into that box because it also connects to the internet. And again, that's that phone to DVR, not DVR to cloud and phone to cloud kind of setup. So you got to look at stuff like that. That's how you get secure cameras that you don't have to worry about that vulnerability. And for the most part, that's kind of my rant on smart home security. So just to run that down, your Wi-Fi router is the most important thing on your home network. Make sure you harden that by changing the admin password, making sure no ports are open that don't need to be open, and don't use the default Wi-Fi settings. Change the password on your Wi-Fi settings itself. Use a guest network. Use a separate network for your smart devices. For every account that you create, have a different password that is managed by a password manager. That password manager will not only create different ones and remember it for you, also search the deep web. Most of them search the deep web for data breaches and will let you know if those passwords have been compromised. Um, Try to go more local. I love Home Assistant, and I recommend Home Assistant to everybody that's willing to put in the time into it because it's the most secure and private way of doing things. You can even do your own voice assistant. You can get rid of Amazon Echoes and the Google Home speakers by using their voice assistant. I haven't done that yet, but I will. Try to do as little Wi-Fi devices as possible. Not only does it clog up your Wi-Fi network, but it's another device that can be a potential security vulnerability. And just overall pay attention where your data is going and who you're signing up with. You know, not all companies are created equal. Anybody have any other questions? So now I'm going to open the floor up to free questions. It can be about smart home security. It can be about just anything you're curious about for smart homes. And while we're waiting on questions, I'll kind of go through Griffin because I highly recommend Griffin. Griffin's awesome. Griffin also is really good at parental controls. We're not sponsored by him. I'm not sponsored by anybody. That's why I talk freely about whatever I want. I don't think I have really anything bad to say about them. You basically create. It was the first one where I didn't have to physically log into the router through like a web browser. I downloaded an app and connected it through a QR code, the tower, to the app, and then started configuring it from there. So out of the box, it was completely customizable and kind of walked me through everything. You know, my antivirus, the settings for IDS, IPS. I created separate profiles for each person in my house and actually started assigning devices to those people. So for like my kids, I could set certain limits of like elementary school. So my oldest daughter was in elementary school, still is, but I had that restriction set on her profile, so she couldn't view anything that wasn't appropriate for elementary school kids. Plus, I could also individually block things like regular YouTube and not kids YouTube, or Discord or anything I didn't feel appropriate for a child to be on. Um, so if you got kids and you're also security minded, Griffin is the number one product I would recommend. Unless you want to go with Unify, but then you gotta set up everything yourself. The other option is the Firewalla. So if you're not going to replace your router, which I always recommend, don't sign up for the ISP router. You're paying anywhere from $10 to $20 a month for a Wi-Fi system. I, they were crap. A lot of them are crap. They're just. I got the Square Nighthawk. That was just terrible when I first signed up with. I think it was Consolidated, and it was the worst thing ever. I immediately stopped using it and went and bought my own. However, I didn't know I was paying $10 extra a month for that, and yeah, I could have saved some money. Most Wi-Fi routers that are decent range anywhere from $200 to $400, and seeing as you're paying anywhere from $10 to $20 a month for their crappy Wi-Fi router, I think it pays off for itself sooner rather than later if you buy your own. Griffins aren't cheap. I think they're $200-$300 a tower. I mean, heck, we can look right now. They're about 300 a tower. So they're a mesh system. Each individual tower you can buy, if depending on the size of your house and the amount of devices you have. I had two. I only needed one for the size of my house, but I had two due to I had over 100 Wi-Fi devices. Does Govee have local option that isn't Wi-Fi? Since you said not too many have Wi-Fi. So Govee actually, some of their products have a local Wi-Fi API. I was tinkering with it this past week because the Govee Home Assistant integration completely just broke on me, and I was tired of always having to reset it. So I was looking at different options to control it locally. For the most part, their newer devices you can toggle inside the app to LAN API, and you can control it locally on the LAN. It will no longer reach out to the server. It will look at whatever device you're controlling it to, whether that be the phone or Home Assistant. You can also control them locally through, what was it, Govee MQTT. MQTT is a protocol that a lot of devices use. But so yes and no. Some devices, Tim, don't have that local option, but they're making all their new ones do it. If that answers your question. Yeah. Anybody's, I guess, paranoid after this conversation, get a Griffin. They're worth it, every penny of it. I used them for years. The only reason why I switched off of Griffin is because they could not handle the amount of devices I had on my network. It's ridiculous. And I needed the speed for everything to communicate with correctly. Um, but up until I went beyond the 100 device threshold, I mean, it they handled everything perfectly. However, if you want to stick with your router that the ISP gave you, but you want to be a little bit more secure, there's Firewalla. Like I said, it does the exact same thing. It has parental controls. It has the intrusion detection. It will tell you when things get on your Wi-Fi that aren't supposed to be there. It'll tell you when devices are acting kind of funny. But this, instead of it being a router itself, it has the ability to do it. It will plug into your network and kind of monitor your network alongside your router. So it's a kind of an auxiliary device, and it's pretty awesome. I mean, it's more expensive than the Griffin routers, but they're great. They also have more higher end products like the Gold. These are meant for more business, and they have the whole firewall everything into it. But I guess they're able to do faster speeds than the purple. I've only ever installed purples. So anyway, anybody got any other questions? Well, if that's gonna be it, guys, I appreciate you sticking it out with me tonight solo. Um, we are. This is the night and the time that this is going to be happening weekly. So every Saturday from 8 to 9. Hopefully, Ryan with Tex Home Smart or Smart Homes will be on next week. He had family obligations, so he wasn't here this week, and we will be talking about smart home lighting, both the efficiency and the razzle dazzle of them, and which ones are the best and which ones are kind of the worst. If you're interested, make sure you like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you'll know when the next video and live streams are coming. With that being said, everybody, stay smart, stay connected. See you next time.